Welcome to episode 9 of the Gravity Tennis Podcast. My name is Scott, and while I've been coaching for more than 20 years, I've spent the last decade specializing in helping players learn to play with less muscle tension, increasing their access to power while decreasing their risk of injury. In this episode, we're going to talk about where you should stand when you're playing singles, or more specifically, where should you recover? Have you ever played someone who just always seemed to be in the right spot at the right time? Do you ever get beaten by opponents with weaker strokes than you, even when you feel like you're playing pretty well? Well, if the answer to these questions is yes, there's probably a simple reason why. They're recovering to the right spot on the court, and you're not. This is not a question of hustle or fitness, but of geometry. If you're always recovering to the center of the baseline, you're making a mistake. But don't worry, there's a simple fix, and if you followed my advice, you'll soon start to resemble that mysterious psychic opponent who seems to always be in the right place. So let's get into it. First, imagine you receive a ball around the center of the baseline. What would be your two widest ground strokes? Well, they'd be the two corners of the court, deuce and ad, where the sideline meets the baseline. But now let's say your opponent hits you a shot that brings you a bit closer to the sideline. Well, your options will change. You can hit down the line, but you also can hit that short angle cross court, which will pull your opponent past the sideline. Now, if your opponent was to stand in the middle of the court, they would have no trouble covering the down the line, but they would be vulnerable to this short angle. So to compensate, a wise opponent would prepare a step or two towards the opposite side of where they hit. You see, the idea of standing in the middle isn't wrong per se, but players often misunderstand which middle we're talking about. You don't necessarily want to stand in the center of the court. What you want to do is stand in the center of your opponent's two widest shots. The further you pull your opponent from the center, the more you need to stand opposite of where you hit in order to cover the short angle cross court. Of course, this also means that if you do hit a shot to the center of the court, the appropriate place to stand is the middle. But keep in mind that you're not recovering to a single spot on the court, but a dynamic one that changes based on where you hit the ball. So in conclusion, stop recovering to the middle. Here's your new rule. Recover to the opposite side of where you hit. You only need to take one or two steps from the middle of the court, but making this one simple adjustment to your positioning will have a profound impact on your ability to get to your opponent's shots. In the next episode, we're going to build a simple strategy off this concept that will help you run less while being more aggressive and hit a higher volume of your preferred stroke. So be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. And if you'd like to see a visual illustration of everything we're talking about, you can check out my blog at gravitytennis.com. It'll definitely be helpful to actually see all this in practice so you don't have to just imagine it. Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. I'll see you next week, and stay loose.